corporate. Corporate only partially, because corporate is partially fundamental. We have HR pension. We have come on. What else do we have?
ITIP,
ITIP.
environment.
Customer suppliers. Other contracts, of course. What else? Real estate. Litigation. Insurance. What? Financials. Balance sheet. Compliance with law. Subsidies. Informations. Due diligence. Data documents. What else?
Annual accounts, financial statements.
We have no broker. All right. Remember the list of reps and warranties. WI insurance. Most commonly, it is a buy-side insurance. Why?
This is a seller-friendly environment.
Yeah, but again, why? Could also be a sell-side insurance.
Because the buyer, if they buy the WI insurance, it makes more attractive this transaction for the seller.
It's also true, but if the buyer pays the seller to take out sell-side W insurance, would achieve the same goal. But why is the seller not a fan of that?
Because
Compensation.
Mm-hmm.
Various compensation.
Yeah, but seller is not liable, so that would not be an argument. Seller's liability is taken away. But still, the seller does not like sell-side insurance and prefers buy-side WI insurance. Why?
Because the buyer can make a direct payment
Yes.
for issue.
Yes. Seller wants to get out of the picture. If you have a sell-side insurance, the buyer needs to make a warranty claim against the seller, and the seller will get reimbursement from the sell-side WI insurance. But the seller is still involved. In a buy-side situation, the buyer makes the claim against its own WI buy-side insurance. No involvement of the seller. The seller is out of the game. Covenants between signing and closing. Covenants is the ordinary course of business between signing and closing when still the seller is in charge. The seller will only, in a seller-friendly environment, will only sell, okay, the only thing I do is I instruct the management to behave. But I'm not responsible. Management is running the business. And it will be your management later. That he will say to the buyer. The buyer obviously wants a liability of the seller. That the seller is liable, that the management behaves. Bottom line, in every scenario you need to have a certain comfort that the company, the target, is in the dates between signing and closing run in the ordinary course of business, just to keep the value. The one thing you need to remember, if you have merger clearance requirement, you cannot close the transaction before merger clearance is given. You also cannot circumvent that if you give control to the buyer before clearance is given. And you give control to the buyer even if the buyer is not a shareholder, but if the buyer controls the management in a way that management can do nothing without asking the buyer for consent. This is having control. This is freezing the target company. In case you have a merger clearance requirement with a prohibition to close, like you have in the German merger clearance environment, then you cannot freeze the company. The two things I have not mentioned as covenants. Any suggestions? Two things you typically see? Non-compete, non-solicitation.
But it's after closing.
No, between signing and closing. That's all between signing and closing. But, no, you are absolutely right. It is in the covenant section, but its effect is after closing. You're absolutely right. So non-compete and non-solicitation is after closing, 2 years. Remember the 2 years. You're absolutely right, good catch. All right, questions?
Multiple choice.
Everything. It will be everything. It will be multiple choice. It will be an essay. It will be simple answers to questions. It will be definitions. It is not an easy one. But you have hints, right? Remember that. I like it. Both sessions and homework, everything is included. What we do now is we circulate session 8 homework, and we do that quietly, and we start Q&A. It is now your chance to ask questions on the classes we have, on the transaction process in Germany, from start to end. Floor is yours.
就你不能开控制吧？
And perhaps to make it a bit easier in terms of questions, if there are none, I have obviously done a wonderful job, which I'm proud of that. But let's start with the process from the beginning. When you think it through without looking onto your notes, you have a first contact. You start a transaction process at some point in time. And then you have to think of the various work streams. So it starts with the first discussions, with NDAs, with LOIs, with teasers and information memorandums. So at the beginning of a process. If you picture that, any specific questions which come to your mind?
The small question, LOI is the same with the memorandum of understanding.
Yes and no. The question is whether an LOI is the same than a memorandum of understanding, or the same than heads of terms, or the same than a term sheet. In principle, yes. It's a different style. So if you think about the content, yes, all those 4 pre-agreements just mentioned, they summarize to a certain degree what the principals have in mind. So the scope of the transaction, the envisaged purchase price, the envisaged timing of the transaction, the various work streams, due diligence, SPA, contract negotiations, but also confidentiality, exclusivity, That can also be part of those agreements. Letter of intent is more a US version where someone sends a document. This is my letter. Just include your acceptance. Heads of terms, memorandum of understanding is more a two-party agreement. Could be, but again, this is not made in stone. It's just that's form. The content is the important thing, so that it is an outline of the transaction. And again, the most important part is the differentiation between binding and non-binding provisions. No? Any other questions with respect to that first stage?
And in the process letter, the information memorandum is like the content of the process letter, or they are
No.
separate?
No, it's a separate document. The process letter is 2, 3, 4, 5 pager, where the investment bank describes to the bidders how the seller wants to structure the auction process and what is requested from the individual bidder to provide for the non-binding offer and for the binding offer. The information memorandum will be delivered to the bidders upon execution of the NDA. It is not even required or necessary that the information memorandum is delivered at the same time before or after the process letter. But it will only be provided after execution of the NDA. Second phase, due diligence. You can think of vendor due diligence, you can think of buyer due diligence, the various aspects of buyer due diligence. The data room, electronical data room, virtual data room, physical data room, access, limited access, full access, various steps of the data room, due diligence reports, different styles. Any questions in that respect?
About non-reliance letter and the reliance letter.
Mm-hmm.
So the reliance letter is basically the team, for example, from the buyer side. I have a team to do my due diligence, and they must give me a reliance letter. But for example, the vendor due diligence, which is done by the seller, they don't give the reliance letter to the buyer, but a non-reliance letter to the buyer. But they have to give the reliance letter to the seller, right?
No.
So,
Oh, well, yeah. Reliance letter and non-reliance letter. First, it's absolutely correct. If you are the bidder, you receive the vendor due diligence report only if you have executed a non-reliance letter, which means that the respective vendor due diligence report provider will not be liable towards the bidder. However, if this vendor due diligence report provider who has prepared this report for his client, being the seller, if there is a defect or a fault or a mistake which leads to a damage of the seller under their client relationship, the seller may make a claim against this vendor due diligence report provider, but never the buyer, the bidder. And the same is true for the buyer due diligence report. I don't have to provide a reliance letter to my client, to the bidder, because I'm liable anyway because of my client attorney engagement letter. Now, and for example, if we do request buy-side WI insurance, the WI insurance provider, they will receive the buy-side due diligence report, so my report, but only on the basis of a non-reliance letter. Again, I don't want to be liable towards the insurance provider. The only exemption is if there is financing involved. If my client, the buyer, secures financing for the transaction, the banks will request the reports first on a non-reliance basis to check whether proper due diligence has been done. And before providing the financing, before executing the financing documentation, they will only do so if they get the reports on a reliance basis. That is okay, but I have to limit my liability, so I will negotiate. Okay? So let's think about the next phase, negotiations, SPA. Pretty much straightforward. Remember the big aspects in an SPA. Parties, object, purchase price. Two ways common regarding purchase price. Lockbox, closing date, balance sheet. Reps and warranties. Seller's limitation of liability. Covenants. No questions. And then we close.
Question for the indemnification.
Yeah.
It's in your slide you said that indemnification is only for the non-risk or for the risk in the
No risk.
or but in the I read some additional reading that indemnification can include the risk that is not identified in the due diligence, but also those already identified in the due diligence that the buyer will ask for a specific indemnification instead of the reduction in the purchase price.
Tell me an example.
But I just read that sentence in the book.
And they have no example?
Example is like, wait me one moment, I can search on it really quick.
Anyone an idea whether the seller will expect an indemnity, a specific indemnity for an unknown topic?
If breach the reps and warranty, they could ask an indemnification. I'm a little bit confused. with
You
this
are
concept
confused
here.
because that is US style. That is US UK style. And that is because you read typically
Yeah,
US
I read
UK.
a US book.
Yeah. We have reps and warranties. And the legal consequence of reps and warranties is the legal consequences to reps and warranties. It's not indemnification.
Mm-hmm.
It is remedies.
Mm-hmm.
We have a tax indemnification. That is separate. Why do we do this differentiation? Tax indemnity means annual taxes pre-closing or pre-effective date, depending if you have lockbox purchase price, belong to the seller. So euro for euro indemnification, that's the answer. For a breach of a reps and warranty, you have a remedy, which is first put the purchaser in the shoes as if there's no breach. If that is not possible, direct damages. Limit your liability. That is not a euro for euro indemnification. The US or UK documents as well, Anglo-Saxon style is you have reps and warranties, sell side, buy side, and then they have a section which is called indemnification, and it's a general section which says indemnified party and the other party. And that is one provision which covers both. So purchaser breach and seller breach. That's the difference.
So what do we like in the example? Which one?
German style. German style. Indemnifications in German European transactions, specific indemnifications, you only get for known risks. So if you think there is environmental pollution, you have done due diligence. You don't dig, because you never dig, because if you dig, you find something. But there is like history on the real estate that there has been pollution. It is an area which there was pollution. It's perhaps an area which has been heavily bombed in World War II. You will want to have a specific indemnification for environmental remediation. That would be something.
So only the things are not included in the reps and warranties?
If it is included in the reps and warranties, and yet you know that there is something,
Yeah.
you cannot make a claim under the reps and warranties because of the fair disclosure concept.
Yeah.
And that is the answer to your question, yes. If something is known and you put it in the reps and warranties, you are not secure. Okay?
In this indemnification is like I'm not understand that indemnification will be offset with the purchase price.
No, no way. No way. It is
Okay,
deemed
I
a reduction of the purchase price. It is deemed a reduction. You cannot offset. Offsetting means that
It happened in the post closing.
and post-closing there's no offsetting. Offsetting, no, at closing, you have the SPA, you have the purchase price, closing date, here is the payment of the purchase price. Now, you only find out later that there's a claim under an indemnification, under a breach of warranties. You only find out later. And then you make this claim now. You cannot offset anymore because you can only offset if you have at the same time, if you have a claim against me and I have a claim against you at the same time. Because then we can say, yes, I owe her 100, she owes me 50, okay, I give her 50. That is offsetting. The reason why you find in transaction documents always the sentence that if payment is made for a breach of a warranty or payment is made under an indemnification, that this is a reduction of purchase price, that is tax. Because the seller, in a good case scenario, in a profitable M&A transaction, has a profit based on that transaction. And that profit is taxed. And that profit is, the basis for the profit is the purchase price. So if you pay the famous 100 million, and that is and the profit is like 50 million, the 50 million is the basis for the taxation. Now if you have an indemnification claim of 10 million, the profit is 40 million. So the tax base is reduced by 10 million, which lowers the tax burden for the seller. That is the reason why you always find a sentence that this is a reduction, that is deemed a reduction of the purchase price. Because the purchase price has already been paid, you can only phrase it like that. Clear? I find it crystal clear. Any other questions? Yeah.
In the shared deal, is there normally no acquisition in good place?
In what?
In good place.
Where? In which situation?
Shared deal. There is no acquisition in good place.
Are you talking about Section 16 German Act on Limited Liability Companies?
Yeah.
There is a chance for a bona fide acquisition. But I'm not a fan of it. Because the prerequisites for that are very strict. It has not been tested yet. If you do a due diligence, you should review the chain of title, and you will or should find out whether or not the shareholders list, which relates to the bona fide acquisition, is correct or not. If you have professional advisors, I doubt that you get a bona fide acquisition if you haven't done proper due diligence. But German law does provide for it. Anyone else? Okay. Okay. Fun part.
What?
做了一个很奇怪的表格。
That is your homework. Oh shit.
哦。
I'm quite happy. Because that is the average of all of you. Well, that is the individual average. That is the average of your homework. Oh, come on. Don't need to make pictures. That will not be part of the exam. Of course, because of GDPR, I cannot put names to it. What does GDPR do in a transaction, by the way? Data protection. So what is the problem with GDPR in a transaction?
For the employees contract, you have to conceal the name.
Not only for employee contracts. Personal data needs to be flag-lined. You cannot add a list to the SPA, including name, date of birth, whatever, from the employees. Even more so, what is the consequence in case of a breach of GDPR implementation?
I can sue for damage compensation.
The employee may or may not, I don't care, in polite words. But what is the real issue?
You have a massive civil liability.
You have massive civil liability. The authorities can come to you and tell you not the lower of, but the higher of 20 million or 4% of your worldwide turnover is a fine you are facing now. So GDPR is a problem. Obviously, I've done it right with 3 exemptions.
Wow.
Sorry, we should clap now a little bit. Where are you?
But there's someone with
But there's 1.01.
Oh,
What's
second
that?
last.
You see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, hold on. Hold on. What color is that?
Bronze.
Bronze.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Wow.
178 and 171.
Where are you?
Oh, wow.
What's this?
That is place 3.
What?
But is it a gift card? What?
You will see. And now we come obviously to the better average, which is
EUA.
anyway. Are you? Well done.
You should have told.
You know that?
Why
You know
would you
that
tell us earlier?
store? Okay, I'll tell you in a
I
second.
guess it's not
But obviously Silver Star.
Yeah.
Not really surprising, and I'm sorry that this class has been burdened with his appearance. We have a number 1. Whoa! Flashing, a little bit flashing.
How is this possible? I don't know.
I don't know. For all of you 3 guys, you don't know, this Hugendubel is a bookstore. It is the most famous bookstore in Frankfurt. You find it, don't go every day shopping on the Goethe Street. I know you do. But it is precisely at the corner of the Festgasse to the Goetheplatz. So you will not miss it. And I hope you find something in that store for you. It's upside to Zara, yeah. Don't go that often to Zara. All right. So let me thank you very much for your patience with me. We will not, well, we might, yeah, we will see each other after the exam again, I guess. Thanks for your attendance. It was a good class. Happy to have you. If you have questions, use WeChat. I will keep that forum open anyway. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I was proud of getting this flashing.
Thank you so
I know. Sorry guys, I know there are a couple of emails in my inbox regarding supervision. It's my second day after vacation, so I will come back to it, okay? This week, perhaps next week. We'll do that.
那还教富裕吗？
教啊，当然教啊，因为他没教学问他没问题。
他还打一干嘛呀？
教了呀，教不教了？
烦死。